Thank you for giving me your attention for the next few minutes to talk about Behavox, to talk a little bit about what it is that we're hearing from our customers and our prospects. And for those of you, I can see a few familiar faces in the audience, but for those of you that haven't heard of Behavox before, as it was mentioned earlier, we are one of the world's leading providers of AI solutions in archiving, security and compliance. But today, we're going to focus in a little bit more on the compliance offerings that we've got. But before I talk about Behavox in a little bit more detail, I think I need to probably earn the right to talk about Behavox by talking about some of the problems that we're hearing in the market and why it is that, that Behavox even exists when it comes to our compliance offering. So some of the things that we hear are we're drowning in false positives. So 99% of the alerts that are being generated on our surveillance system is junk. Not only is it junk, but the legacy solution is so clunky that we can't actually change that and reduce the false positives. Or if we can reduce the false positives, we're too afraid to because we might actually miss some of the true positives because that refinement approach isn't actually well thought out or easily configurable. And I think there's a couple of other key points that come up very often, which is we have so many alerts, what we're doing is we're actually throwing bodies at the problem. So increasing headcount when everyone has this strategic goal, I think, to reduce headcount and to reduce those costs. And probably the most worrying for me is this whole concept that we have some prospects that are simply doing random sample. So hugely concerning if you're only random sampling 10% of the alerts that are being generated, there's 90% of those alerts that are not being caught. So that's one side of the coin. Let's say that the particular organization's been able to reduce the number of false positives. Well, on the flip side to that, there's another problem. So like I mentioned, are we actually missing out on the true positives because we've done so much refinement that we're actually not capturing what we think we should be capturing in terms of risks? Are we covering the right risks? So because we don't have the capacity to actually canvass everything that's important to us, we've got a very small number of alerts now, actually we're missing some key risk categories or risk types. What about voice? What about different languages? And I think by the end of the day, we're going to be sick of talking about this topic. What about AI? So if you're offering some sort of artificial intelligence solution, how do we actually know that it works? How do we explain that to the regulator? How do we test it? And how do we manage that going forwards? Because typically we're not data scientists. I also am not a data scientist. I'm not a sales guy. I'm, like it was mentioned, head of professional services and run the delivery team. So I'm about as in the weeds as it can get with some of these problems and trying to find these solutions and making sure that even I understand what we mean by artificial intelligence. So, some proof. How does Behavox get around this then? So do we actually reduce false positives? Do we actually generate those high quality true positives? Well, this is actually an example of a real life implementation that I was part of. And you can see there in one of the columns you have the before number of alerts. And if we just take the first row and the concept of circular trading, we had 1,200 alerts being generated on a weekly basis for this customer. We implement Behavox, we configure and refine the risk policies that are relevant to the mapped risk policies from their legacy solution, and there was a 95% reduction in the number of alerts being generated. So the cynic in us is always like, well, you've managed to massively reduce the alert volume. What about that earlier problem that you mentioned of, are you now actually missing the true positives? We don't believe that's the case. So here we have some examples of the true positives out of this particular implementation. So on the first example, better to discuss this over the phone versus email on this data, specifically based on our conversation. So there's two things to take away from this. So one, it's an off-channel communication or a suggestion to have an off-channel communication. And the second thing you'll see is there's highlighted text. So the way that Behavox works is it's not a single lexicon. You're actually having contextual, sentence-based risks being raised. You can see that there's justifications associated with this alert as well. The second example there, so here we may have some leeway to temporarily lift the restrictions if the transactions are minimal. Well, this is hugely problematic for a global bank. You've got people that are within the organization trying to circumvent the controls that are in place. perhaps this individual that can't be identified is part of your sanction list, and you're trying to give them data, or you're trying to give them money that actually is hugely problematic for the organisation. There's a third example there, perhaps more on the conduct side. Can we get her out? She was a detractor for me last year. So imagine the high net worth individual that gets wind of this communication taking place. There's a huge reputational damage risk associated with these types of comms. And then for those of you that can read Spanish, I'm not so great at Spanish, but I was told by one of the SMEs, this says something along the lines of, good luck getting any money out of me now, I guess you're fired. So very adversarial type language coming out in the comms. So this is some pretty good examples, just a handful of samples. And you can come and speak to us in our booth as well, and perhaps give us some samples of what you believe are true positives, and see whether Behavox would pick that up. Because we're running a Pathfinder demo in our booth at the moment, and I'll talk a little bit about what Pathfinder is in the context of the other solutions that we offer as well. So here's a pretty good summary, I guess, in terms of the products that are very specific to us in compliance at the moment. So one is Behavox Quantum. So this is essentially our application or set of applications that run AI risk policies over the data that we ingest. You have the Behavox Intelligent Archive. I said that I wasn't going to talk about the archiving piece, but I have to talk about it just in the concept of the whole architecture of Behavox and how that's ingested as well. So coming back to this concept of the Behavox Quantum being the risk policies that run over the top, the main set of applications, Behavox Intelligent Archive, which effectively supports the architecture as a whole. Then we also have the Pathfinder solution. So we have Compliance Pathfinder and Finance Pathfinder, which is almost like a co-pilot for your compliance or financial services employees. All of this is underpinned by the Behavox large language model. So there was some talk about the generative AI models and the open source models, and even the publicly available tools like Gemini or ChatGPT. This is actually a Behavox created, owned and operated large language model. So nothing goes outside of the firewall in terms of what we're using to generate the relevant alerts associated with this. And I'll talk a little bit about how we went about developing that large language model, why it is that it's in particular a little bit more beneficial in the concept of financial services than some of the broader models that are available publicly. So I've talked about then the fact that we reduce false positives, we identify higher quality true positives, and we have this sprinkling of artificial intelligence around as well. But to bring that all together in terms of how it actually works, and to consider some of the different components of this, is moving from left to right. There's a whole raft of different communication types that we ingest. So out of the box, we've got hundreds of plugins that will connect to email, Bloomberg, Reuters, MS Teams, various voice providers like Redbox or Custodia, and take that into our archive. So the Behavox Intelligent Archive is really the first point or first location for all of the data. And this was really built out of the desire for customers to retain that data for a little bit longer than we had anticipated. So we always had this concept of retaining raw data for approximately 30 days. In case there's any issue with the data, we can reprocess it, regenerate alerts. But we found that actually, as soon as we consolidated all of these different data types, different modalities, just text, e-coms, voice, list data, our customers are like, well, this is great. Why don't you actually just retain that for a year, 3 years, 7 years, 12 years for us, because then we don't actually have to worry about porting this over into our other archive. So once it's in the archive, even if it's the minimum 30-day period and you don't actually implement the full archive solution, it will then be available for Behavox Quantum to run our analytics over the top of that. So running the risk policies over communications data, over WhatsApp, WeChat, so social channels, and the voice communications to ultimately generate those alerts. And here's where we have a lot of configuration that's available for our users. They can configure this into workflows so those alerts go to the right people that actually need to have access to the data. They have the right to view that PII. So here's just a sense then of the coverage that we've got, because one of the earlier points that I mentioned was our customers and prospects are worried, do they have the right risk coverage? There's a vast array of risk policies that are specific and available out of the box. So in the lexicon world, you have to do a whole lot of refinement before you can even generate alerts, and that's a lot of work from our customers. We take that overhead away by actually generating all of these risk policies that are available to be run out of the box. And I'll come on to a little bit about that in a moment. But you can just see that there's compliance, insider crime, and conduct and compliance specific risk policies. So I told you a little bit about the how and the what. This is the who. So we've got customers from across the globe, from USA to Qatar, everywhere in between, like Canada, Mexico, Japan, Germany, Denmark, all using the application in various forms and for various different uses. Our industry verticals as well cover a number of different areas, from financial services to commodities to energy, so banks, hedge funds, oil and gas, mining, a very diverse set of customers at the moment. And then in terms of scale, we have quite small customers in the range of 50 monitored employees to quite large customers where we have 30,000 monitored employees. And at the moment, we're going through implementations for customers with even larger numbers of monitored employees than that as well. Lots of data coming into the archive, into the Behavox solution on a daily basis. So from anywhere from 500 gigabytes a week to 3,500 gigabytes per week. We've got large-scale data ingestion. Voice is typically one of the larger data types, so as people are very interested in canvassing voice and identifying risk, the data volumes are only going to go up. And then lots of channels as well. So each customer has an average of 8 channels they're ingesting. That average is going up month on month. So they want to generate more alerts and cover and archive more data as well. So what about if you're not a bulge bracket bank? How do we know that Behavox is going to service you as well? Well, there's different data risk policies that are built specifically for different industry verticals. So whether you're buy side, sell side, energy and commodities, or wealth management, you're not necessarily getting the same risk policies. You're getting the risk policies that are relevant to you that your peers are using, and probably your peers have helped us develop as well. So then the risks that are generated are going to be more specific and relevant to your use cases. I don't know about the rules about naming and praising, but as I said, I've been involved in a lot of projects recently. Here are some of the press releases that we've got recently for BMY, for Vitol and Brevin Howard, how we've actually been working with them to implement the Behavox solution and go through the whole implementation time frame with them. So how does Behavox do this, and why is it a little bit different to then some of the other offerings? So the first thing to maybe highlight is that the model that we've built is pre-trained by Behavox on financial services specific data. So we're a little bit different in that we've got access to very specific chats and voice data that maybe some of the more publicly available LLMs don't have access to. We, very early on, realized that you can't train machine learning models on publicly available open source data. Very confusing if you don't go through that whole process of actually vetting the data that goes into the training data set. And I think one of the other considerations is that these models need to be affordable to run. There's no point in having hugely powerful LLMs if actually at the end of the day, in order to generate those alerts, it's very expensive. So where do we get this data? How do we manage to end up with this? Well, we've actually been working on artificial intelligence for a long time, and part of that was actually getting and gathering the enforcement cases, getting customer contributions. So a lot of our customers want to work with us directly to improve the models that we've been developing. We get raw data, whether that's purchased or donated, and we have an expert community as well that's contributing data and also creating synthetic data to ultimately put that data within our compliance knowledge base. So the compliance knowledge base is really important in the context of artificial intelligence, because going back to that earlier problem of how do I explain it, how do I know that it actually works? Well, this is the black box that is not a black box. You can actually lift the cover on the compliance knowledge base and see the training data that's been used in the development of these models. So that means that you end up with artificial intelligence that's explainable, it's testable through outcomes analysis, and it's manageable because we have an ongoing change management process that means that you don't adopt a new model unless you accept it, unless you see those relevant scores going up, like F1, precision, and recall. How do we know that the training data that we're putting in there is relevant? Well, we actually have to agree on it. So this is not unsupervised artificial intelligence and machine learning and training. This is supervised. This is where we have subject matter experts all agreeing that that data is indicative of a risk and sits right in the middle of that circle in a Venn diagram, so it can't be confused with other risk types. So all the data that's going in is very high quality. We get lots of submissions from customers saying, can you just take this data in? We don't necessarily just accept that data. It has to be vetted. So a key point around the risk coverage and the risk taxonomy, it's across text and voice. So one of the things that we see other vendors is a very big focus on text-based AI, but we have both. And all of those relevant risk policy categories will have coverage for each of them. We're also multilingual, so we have a lot of different languages that we cover in both of our offerings. We have what's called advanced scenarios, which are more lexicon-based. It's still out of the box where we give you the lexicon list. And we also have artificial intelligence risk policies, and you'll see that there's 10 languages in production as of today that are AI-based, because these are the highest priority languages from our current customer data set. But it is possible also to extend our artificial intelligence models very quickly and easily. So I talked a little bit about then the reduction in false positive, the reduction of alert volumes. One of the things that we hear consulting organizations, and of course I run professional services and I have experience at other large management consultancy firms, the big focus is on headcount reduction outside of Behavox. But we're not great at that. I can be transparent and say that that's not our core offering, but we are great at technology. So with this fewer alerts, more high quality alerts, the consideration that our customers have is, do we have the right alert reviewers? Because now our L1, L2 is not reviewing alerts that are really low quality and just closing off all of these obvious false positives now. Now they're actually getting very valuable, high quality true positives that they don't quite understand. They're like, well, how come this has been flagged? And this is where something like Pathfinder comes in, because Pathfinder can be used to, in very granular detail, explain why an alert generated. So this is not the core part of Behavox, this is not the core platform. This is a sub-offering that we've developed recently where, you probably can't read that, but the question is, does the following phrase violate any regulations? If you want intel, ping me on WhatsApp. And then on the left-hand side, there's an answer that says that the phrase, ping me on WhatsApp, might be indicative of using an unauthorized channel. And then it goes on to do a discussion summary. So if there was really intricate industry-specific language being used, it'll play that out in layman's terms so that you can understand really what's going on. And then it will bring up the relevant enforcement actions that are associated with that risk, as well as industry papers. So I know that some of the people in this room have actually written some of the industry papers that are involved in this tool and highlighted. This, you can actually come and demo with us, either in the demo that I'm going to be running or at the booth, and try out some of the true positives that you might be familiar with and say, would Behavox flag it? So Pathfinder, not only is it great as a training tool, great as a tool to help the team understand why an alert's been generated, but you can also use this to actually see, would Behavox core work? Because the same LLM underpins Pathfinder that underpins our main artificial intelligence models. So just to probably come full circle then and put some quick sort of facts around Behavox, we have dedicated customer success and support. So part of that is a project management team that will help deploy the solution. We say when we're talking to customers and when we're living the implementation, we do the work. So 75% plus of the work's done by us. We have a very dedicated implementation team. We have a high customer satisfaction score, so 93% CSAT. We've also got dedicated customer success managers that work on our accounts as well as 24/7 support. I think we're really proud of the next bullet point, which is around financial stability. I noticed that we weren't up on the earlier slide around investments. That's because we're profitable as of January this year. So a little bit obscure for a technology company like ours to be already breaking even, but you can check that. All of our details are available on Companies House, so you can sort of see the transparent audit of our organisation this year. And then the final point here is we have a huge focus on security and SaaS. So on the security side, we've completed our third consecutive SOC 2 audit this year. And barring 2 customers that are legacy customers, everyone else that we have is now using SaaS, so Behavox SaaS offering. So key takeaways. If you use Behavox, we're going to increase operational efficiency. So this is reduction in time spent reviewing alerts because there's simply fewer of them. Reduction in time spent maintaining the application because you're not maintaining lexicons. We're doing a lot of that pre-training for you and offering you things out of the box. Efficient representation in model validation and regulators, because there's a lot of documentation that comes available related to Behavox out of the box. You're not developing custom documentation associated with these risk policies. Point 2, increased risk coverage. So whether it's text, voice, different languages, different modalities, a lot of our risk policies are available out of the box for you to use to generate those meaningful and manageable alerts. And then finally, it's a configurable and seamless experience. So if you don't want to use the specific out-of-the-box risk policies, it is also customizable and configurable. So if you want to add your own lexicon, add your own keywords, it's very possible to do that within the Behavox application as well.